Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired.
Trump reclaiming the White House.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
And look what happened.
Donald Trump officially wins the race for president.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the greatest capitalist in the history.
Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States.
Now, Democrats still won. We say Democratic candidate because it was Harris last night, Biden in 2020. So Harris wins the youth vote by 13 points. But 4 years ago, Joe Biden won it by 24 points. So basically got cut in half. And the other interesting part about this is overall, we had a gender gap last night, but it wasn't as big as people were expecting it to be.
Election day has come and gone, but the results turned out to be quite different from what anyone anticipated. Analysts, pollsters, and the media projected a certain outcome, one that seemed reliable based on traditional voter behavior. However, it became evident that voters, particularly the younger generation, had other ideas in mind. Now, with Kamala Harris scheduled to speak at Howard University, all eyes are on her, and many are left wondering what her address might signal for the future of American politics. The 2024 election was indeed a remarkable event, one that has left people across the nation scratching their heads. Predictions were widely off the mark, and instead of seeing the expected voting patterns, we witnessed a substantial shift that nearly no one saw coming. Perhaps the most surprising trend was that young men, typically seen as steadfast supporters of progressive causes, leaned instead toward conservative candidates. This surprising shift has introduced a fresh layer of unpredictability, prompting discussions on what lies ahead for political dynamics in the U.S.
Call up the exit polls from last night. Take a look. Okay. Voters under 30. And we got here a comparison to what happened last night and what happened 4 years ago. So last night, Democrats still won. We say Democratic candidate because it was Harris last night, Biden in 2020. So Harris wins the youth vote by 13 points. But 4 years ago, Joe Biden won it by 24 points. So basically got cut in half. And the other interesting part about this is overall, we had a gender gap last night, but it wasn't as big as people were expecting it to be. But it was massive among the youngest voters. Among men under 30, Harris won by 2 points. Wow. Among women under 30, Harris won by 36 points. So the gender gap is growing among the youngest group of voters. Overall, less Democratic, but look at that gap.
Yup. For years, this demographic was almost assumed to be in sync with agendas focused on social justice and progressive ideals. But this time, it seemed like they had a different idea. It's as if they looked around, thought about where things were headed, and decided it was time for a change. And this wasn't some random flip of a coin either. These young voters sent a loud message, one that revealed an underlying frustration with the current direction of leadership and policy. And what exactly was that? Well, you are going to answer that. In the comments, obviously. Anyways, let's say you are one of those political strategists on election night, checking exit polls and realizing something went seriously sideways. Well, there must have been a lot of, how did we miss this moments as the numbers rolled in? And here's the thing, many of these young men ended up leaning toward Trump, a candidate that traditionally wouldn't have been expected to resonate with them. This seems to arise from a broader dissatisfaction, particularly over issues that this demographic felt were being swept under the rug. It wasn't just about who was on the ballot, it was about addressing deeper concerns. For many of these voters, there was a sense that mainstream politics was too focused on identity issues without adequately addressing what they saw as the real issues, let's say economic stability, crime, and future job prospects. They weren't saying identity issues don't matter. Rather, they felt that the focus on labels and categories was drowning out the bigger picture that impacts everyone's daily lives. And now, Kamala Harris is now set to speak at Howard University, and there's a ton of anticipation around what she'll say. This isn't just another speech. It's a chance to address some of the confusion and maybe provide some answers for those wondering what happened. Harris and her team likely know the stakes here. Her advisors are probably working overtime, combing through every possible angle, trying to cover all the bases to reassure those feeling caught off guard by the election results. For some, this speech will be about clarity, an attempt to make sense of the unexpected turn that has left both sides rethinking their assumptions about what matters to voters. And so, all right, we're left with a major question. What did this election actually reveal? In the past, focusing on identity politics was seen as some sort of go-to strategy for energizing certain voter bases. The topics of women's rights, racial equality, and social justice have been central to political discourse, championed as vital causes that would naturally resonate with young voters. But this time, it seems many young people pushed back, feeling that these issues weren't the full picture. Some viewed the heavy emphasis on identity categories as limiting, almost like it reduced their individual experiences into labels. For them, this approach ignored more immediate concerns that they felt weren't being given enough attention. It's not that they were rejecting progress on social issues. Rather, they were asking for a broader focus, one that also includes the challenges of finding stable jobs, dealing with crime, and feeling secure about their economic future. As election data began rolling in, it became quite obvious that Trump was pulling in numbers from demographics that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The turnout was so noticeable that some in the media began wondering aloud, did Democrats miss something? Harris, in her speech, is expected to address this very question, most probably emphasizing ongoing vote counts and recounts to give an impression of transparency, but also to remind the public that the results aren't quite final. You can sense that there's a bit of scrambling to understand where the message missed the mark. Now, if this voting shift caught you by surprise, don't worry, you're not alone. Plenty of commentators are still in disbelief, but it's worth digging a bit deeper to understand why. What about the messages and policies of this election that didn't quite land the way they were expected to? Could it be that some young voters felt disillusioned by promises that seemed more focused on dividing and labeling than on finding common ground? You see, one reason for the shift could be linked to what many young people are seeing in their day-to-day lives. Jobs, or the lack thereof, student loans that feel like a life sentence, rising rent prices, it all add up. For some young voters, these tangible struggles can outweigh messages about broader social justice. They want solutions that will impact their daily lives, and some seem to believe that focusing too heavily on identity politics has detracted from addressing these more practical issues. The challenge for Harris, and for the Democrats in general, will be to reconcile this growing disillusionment with a return to core issues that appeal to everyone, not just specific groups. And this isn't a challenge that's unique to her. Politicians across the spectrum are realizing that voters, particularly younger ones, are tired of being told what issues should matter to them. They want leaders who listen and tackle the issues that are already weighing on their minds, rather than define what should be important based on category. Want a better picture? Well, let's just say you're at a restaurant and you're starving. The waiter keeps talking about the chef's background, the ambiance, and the experience. All you want is some food, not a speech. For many voters, that's exactly how the 2024 elections felt. Feel anything close? But here's the thing. Elections aren't just about policies. They're about people, their stories, and their fears. For many, this election became a poll on whether leaders understood the current struggles faced by the average voter. And as it turns out, young men, in particular, felt they weren't getting the answers they needed. It wasn't about rejecting progressive values altogether. It was about feeling that the current approach missed a broader focus on everyone's economic well-being. So why did young men turn towards Trump? Was it some sort of sudden realization, a spur-of-the-moment decision? Or is there a deeper dissatisfaction at play that no one predicted? For some, this was a surprising turn. For others, it was a wake-up call that identity-focused messages might have their limits. The appeal of identity politics had at one point seemed unbreakable. But just as trends change, so does voter sentiment, especially among younger generations who are seeing firsthand the consequences of economic policies and the challenges of finding stability. Looking forward, there's a real opportunity for politicians to rebuild trust with these younger demographics. Harris, in her upcoming address, might take this moment to acknowledge these frustrations and make the case that the administration is, in fact, listening. If she addresses these issues head-on, it could indicate a new approach, a way to bridge the gap between identity politics and broader, everyday concerns. After all, this is more than just a political strategy. It's about proving to voters that they're more than just a tick mark on a chart. So, where do you stand on these surprising election results? Do you think this trend will reshape future campaigns? Drop your thoughts below, and let's get the discussion going. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe to stay updated on all things political and unexpected insights in the ever-changing world of elections. Stay tuned.